My name is Harper Ellison, and if you've ever seen the slogan "Designing the American Dream" plastered across real estate magazines or freeway billboards along the East Coast, then you already know the empire I come from, Ellison & Co., the luxury development firm that practically built half of the mid-Atlantic suburbs. What you might not know is that & Co. never included me. Sure, my last name was on the letterhead. I had an ID badge, a title, an office. But within the walls of that company, and within the walls of my family home, I was never considered one of them. I was the youngest. The only daughter. The outlier. Growing up, I didn't play with dolls or host tea parties. I followed my father, Charles Ellison, through dusty construction sites and half-finished luxury homes, gripping a clipboard twice my size. While my brothers, Mason and Ryan, were being groomed for greatness, learning how to talk to contractors, close deals, manage investor expectations, I was treated more like the family mascot. I brought the coffee, took the notes, smiled at the guests. It didn't matter that I was the one staying up late studying zoning ordinances while Mason went to parties and Ryan coasted through community college. It didn't matter that I was the first in the family to earn an MBA or that by the time I was 24, I was running a regional portfolio worth nearly $60 million. They still called me kiddo in meetings. They still told me I was ambitious in the same tone you'd use for a puppy trying to climb stairs. But I was patient. I took every opportunity thrown my way. I interned in the finance department at 17, shadowed site supervisors, built cost projection spreadsheets for fun. I knew Ellison & Company inside and out. Its history. Its blind spots. Its vulnerabilities. I thought that if I just worked harder, they would have no choice but to take me seriously. But I was wrong. The breaking point came on an overcast morning in April. I'd been added to the agenda for the quarterly leadership meeting, my first time presenting a major proposal. I'd spent weeks preparing. I had done the market research, created a 5-year development strategy focused on sustainable housing, and even brought in outside consultants to back my projections. The industry was shifting. Buyers under 40 were looking for smart homes, energy efficiency, eco-luxury. Ellison & Company was falling behind. My proposal wasn't just timely, it was necessary. When it was finally my turn, I stood at the front of the glass-walled conference room, my slides already queued, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I walked them through the opportunity. The changing market demand. The gaps in our current model. The profit potential in pivoting before our competitors did. I paused at the final slide, which projected a 38% revenue increase over 5 years. Silence. Then, my father leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "You're not one of us, Harper." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. "Excuse me?" I said, blinking. "This company was built by men," he continued. "It's run by men. You've always been smart, but you think with your heart. That's not instinct. That's sentiment." I stood frozen. Mason smirked. Ryan adjusted his tie like he was bored. My mother sat quietly at the end of the table, eyes down. No one spoke in my defense. Not even my uncle, who had once told me over coffee that I was the most strategic mind in the family. I swallowed. I presented projections, not emotions. My father shrugged. "And they're impressive. But this isn't your lane." After the meeting, I sat in my office, technically the project manager's suite for the Mid-Atlantic division, but never formally recognized in any promotion bulletin. The sun had dipped low. Shadows stretched long over the floor. Then he walked in. No knock. Just the quiet thud of leather shoes on marble. "You know," he began, like he was starting a casual conversation, "your brothers, they're not perfect, but they get what it means to carry the Ellison name. You've always been more of a dreamer." I scoffed. "You mean someone with vision?" He stared at me. "I mean someone who confuses vision with power. Who thinks having ideas is the same thing as knowing how to lead." He paused. And then, With the same cold certainty I'd seen in dozens of his business negotiations, he said. "You were never the smart one, Harper. You just worked harder to make up for it." Then he walked out. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in silence in the dark, the glow of my muted laptop reflecting back at me. I didn't feel broken. I felt still. I realized, with startling clarity, that I had spent my entire life trying to be seen by people who had no intention of looking. If they wouldn't make room for me at their table, I'd build my own. But I wasn't done yet. There was still a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, if I gave them one more plan, something bulletproof, undeniable, they would finally see what I brought to the table. So I went back to work. I refined my proposal, strengthened the projections, created mock branding, and even designed a sample digital campaign. I booked a private room in the headquarters. Invited only the decision makers. I rehearsed my pitch until I could deliver it in my sleep. This was my final shot. When the day arrived, I wore my best suit, walked in with my head high, and presented with more confidence than I'd ever had. When I finished, I looked around the room, heart thudding. My father leaned back in his chair. "Are you done?" I nodded slowly. He turned to Mason. "You want to explain to your sister why that would bankrupt us in a year?" Mason chuckled. "Harper, you've got all the buzzwords: green building, smart homes, tech-forward design. But this isn't a TED Talk. It's a construction firm. We're not building homes for Elon Musk." The others laughed. My father added, "You want to play CEO? Fine. But not here. Start your own firm. See how far that gets you. Just don't pretend you're one of us. Not one of us." Again. I gathered my papers, turned to leave. As I reached the door, Ryan called out, "Hey, if it doesn't work out, there's a boutique interior design firm hiring. Maybe you can help them pick curtains." Another round of laughter. And I knew. They didn't see me as a partner, a strategist, a leader. They saw me as decoration. That night, I went home, packed a suitcase. The morning after I walked out of Ellison & Co., I stepped off a plane into the biting wind of downtown Chicago. The sky was gray, the streets slushy with the remnants of late winter, and my suitcase wheel snagged every sidewalk crack like it was mocking me. I had nothing lined up. No apartment. No plan beyond survival. But I had clarity. I wasn't Harper Ellison, heir to a legacy that didn't want me. I was just Harper, a woman with a degree, a vision, and a lifetime of being overlooked. I found a tiny walk-up apartment above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and fresh bread every morning. The water heater coughed when I turned on the shower. The windows whistled in the wind. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, there were no expectations weighing down my last name. I bought a used laptop off Craigslist. Reinstalled every piece of design software I could afford. And I opened a blank Word doc with shaking hands. No boardroom. No logo. No legacy to protect. Just me and an idea that refused to die. I named the company Lumen Studio, after a barely visible star in a remote corner of the galaxy. Something quiet. Often missed. But still burning. Still moving. It felt right. The early days were brutal. I ate cheap noodles and microwaved rice. I took freelance gigs editing floor plans and doing virtual consultations for realtors just to cover utilities. But I never stopped working. I pitched myself relentlessly, emailing local contractors, small-time developers, even individual homeowners with renovation dreams. Most ignored me. A few replied out of curiosity. Fewer still agreed to meet. My first project was a bathroom remodel for a newlywed couple who wanted eco-chic meets downtown minimalism. I undercharged them so badly it nearly wiped out my savings. But I delivered every tile, fixture, and design element exactly on time. And they told everyone they knew. That one project turned into 3. Then 5. Then 8. I stayed up every night drafting plans, sourcing recycled materials, negotiating with wholesalers, and juggling permits. I learned how to be a designer, a project manager, an accountant, and a janitor, because there was no one else to do it. By month 4, I had a waiting list. By month 6, I'd hired my first part-time assistant, Cleo, a logistics genius who had quit her last job after being passed over for a male colleague she trained. We didn't talk much about our pasts. We just worked. I didn't mention my family. Not because I was hiding. But because I didn't want Lumen to be about revenge. I wanted it to stand on its own. Still, I kept tabs on Ellison and Company out of habit. Their headlines were steady but unimpressive. Their projects stayed big, bulky, and traditional, like they were building for a market that had already moved on. Their online presence was flat. Their branding hadn't changed in a decade. Their innovations were mostly surface level. It was strange seeing them from the outside. Detached. Ordinary. One day, Cleo handed me a manila folder. "New bid opportunity," she said. "Mid-size commercial build in Charlotte. The client's down to 2 firms, us and Ellison & Co." My stomach dropped. "They're leaning toward us," she added with a sly grin. "We're faster. More flexible. And, let's be honest, smarter." I opened the folder. Read through their proposal. It was fine. Predictable. Efficient, maybe. But uninspired. We submitted ours quietly. And won. No one from Ellison ever knew who beat them. And I liked it that way. That first victory lit a fire. We pivoted hard into mid-level commercial bids. Apartment buildings. Co-working spaces. Sustainable office parks. Our design philosophy was sharp. Modern but timeless. Smart but not gimmicky. Sustainable but beautiful. We branded Lumen as the boutique, forward-thinking firm for people who didn't want to settle for cookie-cutter construction. Our clients were women-led households, young professionals, LGBTQ+ couples, tech-savvy families, people who had long been dismissed by traditional firms. And it worked. I recruited carefully. Handpicked people who had stories like mine. Designers who had been passed over. Engineers who'd never been invited to pitch meetings. Project managers who knew how to lead but were always kept in the background. We didn't care about titles. We cared about ideas. Our office was modest, exposed brick, second floor of a converted warehouse, but buzzing with energy. Every whiteboard was full. Every seat was filled with someone who had something to prove. And together, we proved it. We started winning more bids. Quietly. Our name showed up on more and more shortlists. We never bragged. Never announced our wins. But word got around. Then came the day we received a call from a high-profile client in Boston looking to build a smart housing community. It was a massive opportunity. And they had narrowed it down to 2 finalists. Lumen Studio and Ellison & Company. I flew to Boston personally. Sat in the glass conference room across from the client team. Presented every detail of our plan, customization, sustainability, cost efficiency. I showed them that we didn't just build homes. We built stories. At the end of the meeting, the lead developer looked at our proposal, smiled, and said, "This is exactly what I didn't know I needed until I saw it. Tell me, who are you people?" I smiled. Just a team with a lot to prove. We won the contract. That quarter, we beat Ellison on 2 more bids. Still, they didn't know who we were. And I didn't correct them. Let them underestimate us. Let them laugh in their boardrooms and call us lucky. Let them think I had disappeared. Because by the time they realized the truth, I would already be too far ahead. At first, it felt like a game I was playing by myself. Every time we won a bid over Ellison & Co., I didn't mark it with champagne or a celebration. I just noted it, mentally filed it under proof. Proof that I could outmaneuver them. Proof that everything they once told me wasn't true. Still, no one at Ellison seemed to realize who was behind the firm that kept taking their clients. Lumen Studio was making waves, not loud ones, but ripples strong enough to reach industry ears. We'd quietly become known as a nimble, visionary firm that moved fast, adapted faster, and designed spaces that felt both intuitive and inspired. Our client base kept growing. First it was individuals and boutique developers. Then came mid-sized commercial projects. Then city contracts. But it wasn't until we beat Ellison and Company for a government bid on retrofitting sustainable buildings that I saw the first real crack in their armor. It was a massive, multi-year contract, one they'd practically already printed marketing materials for. And yet, we won it. That was the moment I knew, we weren't just competition. We were a threat. I started hearing whispers in the industry. That Ellison's board was frustrated. That they were trying to modernize their image. That they'd brought in branding consultants who used phrases like digitally agile and authentically forward. I didn't need to dig for dirt. I didn't need to spread rumors. Truth has a way of leaking when people get desperate. And Ellison and Company was starting to sweat. The signs were everywhere. Their social media suddenly shifted, using pastel color palettes that suspiciously resembled ours. They posted behind-the-scenes reels of site visits and interior concepts that felt forced and hollow. Their email campaigns adopted a warmer, more personal tone that didn't match the brand they'd built over decades. They were copying us. But they didn't even know who us was. I remember the exact moment that changed. I was attending a national trade expo, not as a speaker, not even as an exhibitor. Just an observer. I wanted to see how the industry was evolving. Ellison and Company had a booth near the back of the exhibition hall. It was smaller than I expected. No giant banners. No glass podiums or digital projections like they used to flaunt. Just Mason and Ryan, flanked by two marketing assistants, standing stiffly beside a model of a generic suburban home. I kept my distance, blending into the crowd. And then I watched as a developer I had met 2 weeks earlier approached their table. When Mason handed him a brochure, the developer gave a polite smile and said, "Oh, I'm actually already in talks with Lumen Studio. They're doing incredible work." Mason's face fell. He turned to Ryan, clearly rattled. "Who the hell is Lumen Studio?" I didn't wait around for the answer. I turned and disappeared into the crowd, smiling. They didn't know it was me. Not yet. That night, I walked back to the hotel with a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. I had never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted to be seen. But I also couldn't deny the momentum. Lumen was rising. And Ellison and Company was slipping. 2 months later, we opened a second office, this one in Seattle. We had over 40 employees now, and a wait list that stretched into next year. I'd hired some of the best designers and engineers in the industry, many of them women, people of color, queer professionals, folks who had been quietly brilliant for years and never given a proper spotlight. We didn't just create beautiful buildings. We created opportunity. Then came the article. It dropped one Thursday morning without warning. Ellison and Company faces lawsuit over delayed projects, breach of contract, and internal dysfunction. It wasn't a hit piece. It was an expose. It detailed missed deadlines, budget blowouts, disorganized leadership, and employee dissatisfaction. Anonymous quotes from former staff painted a picture of a company stuck in the past and unwilling to listen to change. I didn't say a word. But I recognized the voices. Several of those anonymous sources now worked for me. That afternoon, I sat in my glass-walled corner office overlooking the Chicago skyline. I read the article once. Then closed the browser. No celebration. No emails. No forwarded links. I just sat there, letting the quiet settle. This wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about building something real. Something better. Something mine. But the world didn't want quiet. The world wanted a story. And a week later, it got one. Someone leaked my name to the press. Maybe it was a former classmate. Maybe a contractor we worked with. Maybe someone who put 2 and 2 together when they saw a Harper Ellison signature on a permit application. However it happened, it was everywhere within hours. Lumen Studio founder revealed, Harper Ellison, daughter of Charles Ellison, quietly builds rival empire. CNN, Forbes, Business Insider, Architectural Digest. Even morning talk shows were running the story. Suddenly, I wasn't just the anonymous force behind Lumen. I was the exiled daughter. The underdog. The one who came back stronger. My phone buzzed non-stop. Interview requests. Partnership offers. Congratulations from people I hadn't heard from in years. Our website crashed from traffic. We received over 200 inquiries for collaboration in 48 hours. Investors called asking about expansion. One VC firm offered to double our valuation on the spot. The Lumen team was thrilled. They celebrated. Toasted champagne in the break room. And me? I sat in my office, looking out at the city. Then I opened my phone. One message waited for me. From my mother. Your father saw the news. He hasn't spoken in an hour. I stared at it. And for the first time in years, I felt no anger. No pain. Just release. For so long, I thought proving him wrong would fix something inside me. But it turned out, I didn't need to fix anything. I had already healed. The morning after the story broke, I woke up to hundreds of notifications. My phone vibrated so much it fell off the nightstand. I reached for it slowly, knowing full well that the world was no longer the same. It was a strange feeling, being known. For years, I had worked from the shadows. Lumen Studio had been my armor and my sanctuary. The anonymity had given me room to breathe, to build without interference or assumption. But now, the world had ripped off the curtain. Everyone knew. I wasn't just the woman who founded a rising design firm. I was the daughter of Charles Ellison, the man who had denied me, dismissed me, and told me I was never one of them. The headlines painted me as a phoenix. From rejection to revolution, Harper Ellison redefines luxury design. The woman who quietly dismantled her family's empire. Smart. Strategic. Silent. Until now. The irony. I hadn't said a word. But silence was no longer an option. The world wanted to hear my voice. And maybe. It was time they did. My publicist booked a primetime interview. National broadcast. Full feature. I wasn't sure I wanted it. But I also knew there were thousands, maybe millions, of women like me watching. Women who had been told they didn't belong, that they were too much or not enough. Women who had been asked to wait their turn only to find out that their turn was never coming. I wouldn't speak for revenge. I would speak for them. The studio lights were warm, the stage set to look comfortable but powerful. Neutral tones. Soft edges. Just like a Lumen design. The host welcomed me with that polished tone they teach on day one of broadcast journalism. Tonight, we're joined by Harper Ellison, visionary founder of Lumen Studio and, as the world now knows, the daughter of real estate titan Charles Ellison. Harper, thank you for being here. I smiled. Thank you for having me. Let's get right to it. Why stay anonymous for so long? I wasn't hiding, I said, calmly. I was building. I just stopped asking for permission to be taken seriously. That line hit hard. I saw the host pause. Saw the viewers in the audience nod. Your family's firm, Ellison & Co., has struggled recently. Some say Lumen is partly responsible. What would you say to that? I'd say it's not about who you beat. It's about what you create. Lumen was never about revenge. It was about possibility. We talked about design. Leadership. How my team was built from the overlooked, the underestimated. I spoke about how innovation isn't just technology, it's perspective. By the time the interview ended, I knew everything had changed again. The following week, Lumen received over 1,000 partnership requests. Our projects tripled. TED Talks invited me to speak. Ivy League schools asked if I'd consider guest lecturing. Investors kept calling. But one envelope stood out among all the noise. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. My name handwritten in navy ink. No return address. Just a seal pressed into wax. The Ellison crest. I knew before I opened it. Ellison family reunion. Saturday, 4 p.m. The Ellison estate. There was no note. No apology. No explanation. Just an invitation, like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't been cut out, dismissed, erased. For a long moment, I stood by the window of my office, turning the envelope over in my hands. I could have ignored it. Tossed it. Forgotten it. But I didn't. I RSVP'd yes. Saturday arrived with unseasonable warmth. Chicago was sunny. Crisp. I wore a cream-colored tailored suit, soft but structured, elegant but commanding. No labels. No glitter. Just presence. A black Rolls-Royce Ghost waited outside. It was on loan from a Lumen partner, but it carried the right message. Not loud. But unmistakable. I arrived at the Ellison estate just before 4. The long driveway still lined with roses and order. The kind of perfection that masks control. As I stepped out, the valet's hand shook when he opened the door. He recognized me. Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered it, grand, cold, curated to impress. The air smelled like polished wood and money. I walked past portraits of old Ellisons, men in suits holding blueprints and hammers, as if they'd personally laid every brick. Conversations dimmed as I entered. Heads turned. For the first time in my life, they didn't look through me. They looked at me. Some out of shock. Others out of something closer to fear. I saw uncles, cousins, old family friends, many of whom had once smiled politely as I poured coffee during board meetings. Now, no one asked me to pour anything. My mother approached first. Her eyes looked tired but warm. "You came," she said quietly. "I did. You look." She trailed off. "Different?" I offered. She smiled faintly. "Powerful." I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. Mason and Ryan stood near the fireplace, identical drinks in hand. Both froze when they saw me. Ryan tried for his usual charm, but the smirk faltered before it formed. Mason just nodded stiffly. No jokes. No snide comments. They'd read the articles. Watch the interview. They knew now. And I didn't need to say a word. Then I saw him. Out on the back patio, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the same hedge maze he once used as a metaphor for business. You don't need to see the whole path, just the next turn. Charles Ellison. My father. I walked slowly, each step measured but certain. He turned as I approached. We stood in silence for a few seconds that stretched longer than our last conversation. "You came," he said, voice low. "I did. You've made quite a name for yourself." I said nothing. "We could use someone like you," he added. "The company is in transition." I looked him in the eye. No anger. Just clarity. "You once told me I wasn't the smart one. That I was just a dreamer. That I worked harder because I had to make up for what I lacked." He didn't deny it. Just stared, face unreadable. "I used to believe you," I continued. "But it turns out, working harder wasn't weakness. It was survival." I stepped closer. "You want my help now. But you never asked why I left. You never asked what I built. You only reached out when your empire started to fall." He opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to fix what you broke." Then I stepped back. "I'm not like you. And that's exactly why I succeeded." And with that, I turned and walked back inside. The crowd parted. Not out of fear. Not out of awe. But out of respect. And this time, it wasn't something I had to beg for. It was something I had already earned. I left the Ellison estate without looking back. No one followed me. No one called after me. There were no dramatic speeches, no last-minute apologies. Just the quiet crunch of gravel under my heels as I walked toward the waiting Rolls-Royce. Inside the car, the driver gave me a polite nod as he pulled the door closed. I settled into the seat, fingers resting lightly on the leather. The windows reflected the towering facade of the house where I'd once imagined my future. It looked smaller now. Not because the house had changed, Because I had. As we pulled away from the estate, I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. The last words I had said to my father echoed in my mind. I'm not like you. And that's exactly why I succeeded. For years, I'd thought success would mean proving him wrong. That if I could build something big enough, brilliant enough, he'd finally see me. But standing there, on the patio that once felt like a throne room I'd never be invited into, I realized something freeing. I didn't need him to see me. I just needed to see myself. And I did. Clearly. Proudly. The next week passed in a blur. The interview replayed across multiple networks. Social media lit up with hashtags. Lumen's inbox flooded with new clients, job applicants, media requests. A documentary filmmaker reached out asking to feature our story in a series about female entrepreneurs. But amid all the noise, I felt calm. Peaceful. For the first time in my life, there was no fire behind my work, only light. Not the desperate heat of needing to prove something, but the steady warmth of building something meaningful. I walked into our office that Monday morning with coffee in one hand and a stack of proposal drafts in the other. My team greeted me with grins, cheers, and maybe a few tears from Cleo, who had been with me since our first shared desk in that dusty co-working space. There were balloons on my desk. A small cake that read, the one they couldn't ignore. I laughed. Hard. Not because it wasn't true, but because it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't trying to be noticed. I already was. At lunch, I sat on the rooftop of our building, legs tucked beneath me, watching the sun reflect off the glass skyline. A younger version of me would have been thinking about the next move, the next milestone, the next merger, the next mountain to climb. But I didn't need the next. This was enough. I had built something out of nothing. Not because someone handed me a chance. Because I created one. For myself. And for everyone who had ever been told, not yet. Not you. Not this time. Later that afternoon, I met with a new client, an architect who had followed Lumen's work and wanted to collaborate on a modular housing initiative for low-income families. She asked me, near the end of our meeting, "So, what keeps you going now that you've already won?" I thought about it for a long moment. Then said, "Winning was never the goal. Creating is." She smiled like she understood. And I knew she did. A week later, an envelope arrived at our office. It was from Ellison and Company. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. It was a proposal. A formal offer for partnership. I stared at the embossed logo. The same one that used to tower over every part of my life. The same one that once shut every door in my face. I didn't even open it. I placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk, beside the first ever Lumen logo sketch I'd scribbled in my apartment years ago. Some things you keep. Not as trophies. But as reminders. That Friday evening, I stood alone in our design studio, long after everyone else had gone home. The space was quiet. Clean. Dimly lit by the golden hour sun pouring in through the windows. I walked past project models. Fabric samples. Floor plans pinned to boards. And I smiled. This wasn't a legacy I had inherited. It was a legacy I had earned. Not because of my name. But in spite of it. I thought of the girl I used to be. The one who waited at the conference room door hoping someone would call her in. The one who stayed late revising proposals no one read. The one who cried silently in an office she didn't even have a plaque on. That girl didn't disappear. She became me. She didn't lose. She became. As I turned off the lights and stepped outside, the city buzzed around me, cars, footsteps, laughter echoing off buildings. But inside me, it was quiet. Clear. Steady. A light they couldn't ignore. Because they never built it. I did.